2, 1. I have ice packs literally under my laptop right now.
From overheating?
Yeah. It's
I think
just,
that means you might need a new laptop.
yeah. Well, I thought that Apple was supposed to be like immune to any of those kind of issues.
Hmm. New M1?
It's just a MacBook Pro.
Uh,
Yeah. All right. So, welcome everybody to the YadaCoin Twitch stream. We're here with Patrick, who is a pool owner and part of the infrastructure. So, I'm very excited to have him here. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good.
This is awesome. I'm watching a couple of the streams, so now I get to be a part.
That's awesome. See, Patrick has like a YouTube channel, and if you want to like plug those real quick.
Don't play it up too much.
Okay.
You just look up my name, Patrick Lipp, and that'll get you to my website, to my YouTube channel, Instagram, everything else.
Cool. So what do you like sell hardware or software? I forget.
I do a little bit of everything. By trade, I'm a sysadmin, so that's kind of my background.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of made a business out of that where I can buy and sell hardware, software licenses, and more recently I've kind of switched that into doing, I guess, network system audits. More or less going in and telling people how messed up their systems and networks are.
Nice. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of being like a product owner or something like that, and you can, like tell people how messed up their product is. It's like, do you find that to be pretty fun, or?
Bits and pieces of it. The most enjoyment I get, honestly, out of the troubleshooting, figuring stuff out from scratch. Honestly, the more complex and complicated, the more I enjoy it. There's some sort of reward at the end of it to me. It gives me that dopamine hit or whatever, where it just, I don't know, it brings me joy. It gets me excited.
Cool. That's awesome. So, yeah, I mean, like this week, I think for what's been going on with YadaCoin, it's like, I don't know if you've seen, have you seen the pull request for XM Rig?
I have. So we're trying to get it merged to the official XM rig now?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know, right? It's like Monero's official miner, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess with the amount of development you've been doing on all this, I mean, it's like you're constantly kicking out new updates for this thing, which is going to bring more and more, I guess, notoriety to it, if you will.
Yeah.
Once XM Rig gets on there, and given, I guess, your priority here isn't necessarily the monetary aspect of it, it's the technology behind it, but I guess the monetary part of it isn't necessarily a bad thing either.
No, certainly not. But yeah, it gives a lot of credibility, just to, our whole situation. I feel like if we, get included in that, it's like, Monero is, worldwide known. And I mean, like even what John McAfee talked about it and all that stuff. So it's like, just kind of getting our toes a little bit more into, that, I don't want to say mainstream, but, like into the main conversation, getting us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, getting us closer to being talked about by everybody out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the end goal would be continuing to grow all these blockchain and technologies behind them, and then your own, I guess, technology applications, center identity that you're developing and growing. And it sounds like you've already gotten a lot of interest there with, I think you spoke to a couple banks or something not too long ago.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, we're talking to some folks right now, and at a dollar per user per month, I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, you have like the other competitors out there charging like $15 per user, and I mean, it's like they're going to be paying. I mean, if they have like 50,000 customers and employees combined, I mean, that times 14 versus just $1. I mean, come on now. And the main advantage being that it's all built on the YadaCoin blockchain, so they have all of this audit capability, that they wouldn't have before with like a closed proprietary system. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, do you find that you do like security audits with your consulting?
So that's kind of my primary. My, I guess, day job is working with the military, so security is obviously a massive role there. So my background being, honestly, at the core, the security of it. So it's definitely a massive part of it. Now, not necessarily the primary part, but it plays a huge role with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel like that's a huge advantage, is being able to audit your own system. You know what I mean? It's like if you're going to choose between, a system where you have to like ask them who was talking to who, and or like go somewhere to download messages and user information, versus you could see every single transaction and be able to like cryptographically verify everything.
So yeah, in IT that would be, I believe the term is non-repudiation, where you can't I guess refute or deny that you've done something. From the network standpoint or from the system standpoint, you use, I guess, Active Directory accounts and being able to monitor what a user has done, what have they touched, and then from like an email standpoint, digital certification or digital certificates, then again the email string going to and from the user.
Non-repudiation. Okay, cool. So that's a term that we can utilize.
Yes. Yep. In the IT world, that is definitely something that is important, especially when you're dealing with the sensitive information as a whole.
So, do you find that that businesses generally want to be like on-prem, or do they prefer to like use SaaS products where it's hosted elsewhere, or what do you think?
There's definitely a shift going on now, transitioning into the cloud. Now, depending on what the organization is and what they're doing, that can vary drastically. The costs, if you're a small business or you have you kind of require a low overhead cost, moving to the cloud may not be cost effective. But then on the flip side of that, I mean, I host my own server at home, technically multiple servers, which is where my pool and everything is based out of. And between my server and my disk array, I'm pulling, I think it's like 450 kilowatts per second, not per second. I don't remember what specifically it is. I have a monitor on there right now, but I'm paying roughly $1 a day for electricity of just a single server running an ESXi host that I can more or less have as many VMs on there as I want. But as I scale up and CPU, network resources, and everything else go up, the cost goes up there. So when you get a small business that they may be a small operation, they may have an office, but they may be dependent on paying that electricity bill or the internet bill or whatever else, where that uptime is going to be key. So network has to be up at all times, and then electricity has to be up at all times. That cost goes up astronomically, and it goes up very, very quick. So something where switching to the cloud, where you no longer have to worry about electricity, you no longer have to worry about uptime or downtime. It makes things easier. So I guess rounding back and answering your question, there's definitely a shift going on to the cloud, especially in the smaller businesses, because it just makes more sense. Hosting whatever services they have being cloud-based or SaaS-based, system as a service, where you're paying for only what you need and you don't have an extravagant amount of overhead that you're not utilizing. It just makes more sense.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like, what if the business, the customer of like Center Identity or whatever, what if they were essentially like renting out like a node in the cloud, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just kind of like, I guess paying Center Identity, I guess whatever margin I'm making on it to like manage that node.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty like it sounds like a kind of what you're talking about, but you like get the advantages of the cloud and all that stuff without any of the drawbacks of doing it completely on-prem.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where I'll use Microsoft or Amazon Azure as an example. They have it's essentially a server that you're renting out, a complete server that you're renting out that would be hosted at one of their data centers. It's guaranteed the uptime, the network, everything else. And then from there, you can do essentially whatever you want on that server. If you want to have some sort of virtualized environment where you're controlling it, where you SSH into it to modify whatever you need, or there's some sort of web interface for it, and then you essentially resell what you're selling, which in this case would be whatever product Center Identity has. So yeah, it's definitely doable. It's a possibility. It's definitely a product people are interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like in some ways I'm kind of like selling web hosting. It's like you have like this shared environment for the smaller customers where they can all be on like one Yada node, and basically like everybody's like wallet front end, which is like the secure messaging app, runs off of that one node. But then also, if you want your own dedicated node for like larger companies, or they just want to make sure that only their transactions end up on that one node or something like that, then they can rent out their own node that's like dedicated. So it just kind of reminds me of like.
So, and that's even got a name behind it too. In again, the IT and the defense contracting world, there's it's known as an IO. Now this would be for like Amazon, AWS. It would be depending on what field you're in. So if you are a small business, you could be in a aisle or a rack aisle of servers that are dedicated to small businesses. And then they have various different levels of these aisles where you could have, again, you could be anywhere within a cluster of servers, within a literal aisle of servers, or racks, or you could have it so you're dedicated to a single rack, or you could have a single server in that rack. And then it goes even further than that, where you could own the entire rack of servers. So there's a lot of different options there and opportunities there. So there's definitely customers and clients out there that are looking for exactly that, especially once you start talking about the security aspect of it. There's so many different possibilities, so many different options, so many different variations of all of it. And I guess it would really come down to what a user is looking for, what a customer and what a business is looking for, and whatever organization you're working with, what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good to know. I guess that all these different considerations come into play, which I'm sure will come up, as the customer base grows and we get larger customers, and where their security is more essential to everything. I think right now we're kind of like targeting like real estate agencies and like title companies and things like that, where they may have 10 or 20 or some employees or whatever, and they just want to make sure that nobody is like hijacking the email chain and sending false wire transfer information, so that somebody sends their money to the wrong place, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to know. I mean, because we're going to need to scale up for sure. So it's like, what do we how do we do that? So these are definitely things I'm going to need to know for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And like the YadaCoin network is kind of like, I guess, I don't want to say it, like, it's not really like a cloud, but it's more like, I guess the cloud aspect of it could be part of the YadaCoin network, I guess is what I'm thinking. So, yeah, I mean, I redesigned like the whole like network configuration to where it's like you have, well, I'm sure you've seen it. It's like the service providers, the seed gateways, and then the seeds.
Yes.
I think we need to start thinking about more like, I don't know, how to like incentivize the seed nodes and things like that, and like how to bring those on board more. Because like I think we were talking about, I don't know, they had like validators or something like that.
And that's definitely a technology that's used with a lot of these other coins, if you will, where these other nodes essentially host the blockchain. It adds to the anonymity of it all. Where again that entire identity, the entire blockchain would be, and then I think I was a second node on Yada. And then that would again like spread it to 2 different locations. So now it could be where we both host the entire blockchain, or we split the blockchain between the 2 of us. But then any transactions now, depending on how you have it routing, if it's going from one node to another, then it would then go from my node back to your node, with different transactions going through different essentially wallets on those nodes, which then adds to the anonymity of it. And then again, once you get more of these nodes up, with each hop, it increases and adds to the anonymity of it all. So instead of like, let's say, any of these other users that have their own self-hosted wallets, if they download the entire blockchain or just a portion of the blockchain, whatever it might be, well, even if they're not running a full mining pool, if the master node being yours, or let's just say one of the subnodes like mine, is able to communicate with them, well, now those transactions can now bounce between all of them, increasing the anonymity, making it so it's more and more difficult for these transactions to be, I guess, tracked, or, I don't know, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah. I think that, I think it's like tracked between, I don't know, so we have like 2 things that we need to do. I think it's like, you have the financial privacy of it, and then it's like you have the like the social protocol privacy end of it. And I feel like the social protocol privacy would be more or less easier to do, as long as I just unmarry the private key from the identity that's like interacting with other identities. So, because all of that's encrypted and like hashed and whatnot. So it's like you wouldn't be able to track that if you created, or if you like paid for the transaction with a different private key, if that makes sense. So it's like you can disconnect the social part from the money part. But so the other part of it is that the money part though can't be disconnected. Like you can track the money, like the money transactions from one to the next. There's not really like a lot of anonymity there. So yeah, I think a while ago I was talking about, what was it, Mibble, I forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how all that ties into it, but those are just like some of the things that I've been kind of kicking around. I'm not sure if you've heard of other ways to like increase anonymity or something.
Not necessarily, not that I'm familiar with, but I think the big thing right now is honestly the more, I guess, jumps, the more hops between nodes that would, I guess, be utilized for each one of these transactions, for lack of a better way to put it, whether it be for the communication aspect of it, or the identity aspect of it, or the monetary aspect of it. I think more hops, the better. That way, those wallets not being necessarily linked to any one individual, other than they're with and them labeling that wallet as whatever they want when they log into it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that alone increases the anonymity of it. And then again, like you mentioned, incentivizing people to run these full nodes. I know other nodes that I've run, it's you have to hold so many of the coins in your node, and then for every transaction, every hop that goes through your node, you get like 0.01% of that transaction that would go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So that's something that I was wondering about. It's like if a validator is like validating transactions, um, is there like an element of trust there, between like the node that's actually creating the block and then like the validator?
I think there'd have to be some sort. Um,
That's what I
so
that's what I didn't get. It's like, well, how do you know the validator isn't, like lying? But then it's like, see, I just haven't like done enough research on it, because it just seems like the node creating the block would be the one that's the validator right now, because they're validating all the transactions, I guess. And so then they're just using that to put it into the block. So if you like separate that process out, because there is a little bit more work involved, with taking all the inputs on a given transaction and then verifying that those are already on the blockchain and not spent and stuff like that. But it's like, uh, it seems like the person that owns those validators would have to be the same person owning the block, or owning the miner, the node creating the block, or you might you would certainly introduce some kind of security hazard with the network at large, right?
So I want to say I ran a pool for VTC for Vertcoin, and I want to say their original pools were with what was it? P2 pool or something like that. It was some application that they ran that they dedicated to running their Vertcoin pools. And one of the things that they had, I might be getting this mixed up with another coin, but they basically had it so that they measured the uptime of these nodes or these mining pools. And I think if you were to do something like that, or I'm going to throw out a couple ideas here. Number one, you could do some sort of handshake with it where it's authenticating against the master pool. So the nodes authenticate against the master pool to validate that they are a legitimate node, and then every so often have it revalidate or re-authenticate. And again, that could be where a private and a public key could come into play with the master node, and then with all the additional nodes creating some sort of private key there. Or there could be some sort of uptime monitor to make sure there is no break. And then let's say there is a break in the communication or connection to it, to the master node, then you would re-authenticate. That way there's some sort of verification there.
Well, that's cool, because we already do that. Like all of that health check stuff, and how it says number of seconds until failure.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff, that's all doing that exact thing that you're talking about. So it's okay. And if it does exceed that 600 seconds of like no activity, so like let's say there's no block or anything, or no transaction or anything on that actual WebSocket, or like not WebSocket but just TCP socket connection, then it will disconnect and then reconnect and re-authenticate with that node. And that happens every 10 minutes if there's no activity.
Okay, and you said that's an encryption connection between, I guess, the node and the master node?
Well, it's not encrypted right now, so I mean that's actually a good point. I mean it's just open free text right now, but I mean you're sending the transactions, which the relationship information is encrypted just on the transaction itself. But I mean, I'm thinking about it now. I mean, it could be that you encrypt the actual transaction as well.
And I'm just thinking more along, again, you mentioned from the security standpoint of it all. What are the potential vulnerabilities or risks of this? You're going to either have some sort of listener on your end, some sort of listener on my end, or there'll be some sort of man in the middle that's listening over the network. So you need to circumvent all of those. So what's the most likely of it? Probably not on your end. It would probably be on the node end, where it's just some Joe Schmo like myself running a node on any given PC, or it's going to be something over the internet. So create some sort of tunnel, some sort of encrypted tunnel between the master node and the node, and then again through that between the authentication and the encryption of it, it should make it relatively secure.
Yeah, I mean, because they should have. Well, they'll be able to form a shared key just through like the Diffie-Hellman or whatever. So it's like the Onion protocol. So I feel like we could send I've been thinking about doing this, but using like an Onion type of protocol where you establish. Well, first you understand the route that you need to take to get to the intended target for the transaction or for the communication, and then you establish keys with everybody in between. All the nodes that you need to route the transaction, and then you basically just encrypt it, and then wrap that, and then put the next node key, and then encrypt that. So when you send it out to the next node, it decrypts it. It gets the identifier of the next node that needs to get the transaction. Then they decrypt it, and then they send it to the next one with that identifier. You know what I'm saying? Until it eventually becomes completely decrypted on the node that actually needed to receive it. So that's something I was thinking about doing with YadaCoin. But with the blockchain network, it seems like for payments that like all the transactions need to go everywhere all the time, right? So it's like encrypting it or whatever. I mean, you're basically counting on somebody sniffing it. So I mean, I feel like that whole nibble wibble thing where you don't know like what's going on at all might be like a good thing, but I'm not sure if like people are like really caring about that as far as YadaCoin goes. Are they looking for monetary transaction privacy? Is that like something that people are looking for out of YadaCoin, or is are we like I mean, there's a lot of coins that do that same thing really well. You know what I mean? Do we need to be another one doing that? What do you think?
I think it would come down to really looking into and considering what the primary focus of Yada is gonna be, because I guess thought of following in the path of what so many others have done from the financial security aspect of it is one thing, but I think your primary focus is more on the identity aspect of it. And now I can't speak on how exactly you're implementing the identity aspect on it, and linking the blockchain aspect into it, other than the ability to trace it from point A to point Z.
Yeah.
But I guess potentially using, if I understand Mimblewimble correctly, it's essentially transitioning between multiple different forms of these algorithms in real time. Is that correct? Where it changes over the course of a transaction?
It's like it basically combines numbers. Uh, it basically combines numbers using multiplication and addition, um, to where it would only be like um, divisible by a certain number it were if you had the correct number. Otherwise, you would not end up with like a whole number as like after doing the math, right? This is the kind of way that I'm understanding it. So after you do the you like have to have a number that will like actually divide the bigger number, and you'll come up with an actual whole number, and that's what determines if you actually have the correct number, and that's how it like verifies that you've not created more money in the transaction, and that and it's like, oh yeah, it's gotta like, it's like you use the math to like equal zero basically. So it's like you know that you haven't created any more money, so there's no more inflation, and I forget what the other aspect of it was. You haven't created more money, and you haven't lost any money, I think is the other one. I'm not sure, but anyway.
Okay, so
Yeah.
It sounds like it's potentially more of a validator or a validation than, I guess, security, if you will. Mm-hmm. Which it still adds in some security to it, but it sounds very much like some sort of validation.
Yeah. Well, it's just so that it's like nobody knows what is being sent. Nobody knows how much money is being sent.
Okay.
So like you use all these, like you're combining values is basically what's happening. You're combining values, and in that way you're hiding them. And so like, but you use extra numbers to like kind of deduce that certain things haven't taken place, which is like creating additional money, or you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, but I do see what you're saying. Like with YadaCoin, it's like our main focus is identity, 100%. So it's like I'm just thinking, well, I should probably just keep focusing on the identity aspect of it, and scaling that up. From what I see, it's like we're using the YadaCoin, we're using the coin to essentially pay for like the network fees, really. I mean, like we can send money around, we can send YadaCoins around, and that's just kind of like a feature of YadaCoin. But I think it's not like so much like the central purpose of it. I think like the coin is really just to pay for the network fees, as far as what my original plan was for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's just, you see what I'm saying?
Like, oh, definitely. And I think that social aspect to it with the identity could definitely be leveraged in a professional manner, or honestly, in potentially a public manner. If you were to be able to take this and, dare I say, social network type thing, where you allow users to create this and then use, I don't know, if you kind of wrap the whole security aspect into the whole thing, where sending messages or posting something, you can no longer track a user's IP address or something like that. I think there's an anonymity aspect to that that could be desirable to people. I think especially in the time of Facebook, with all of the hacks and all of the negative publicity of it all, something like this could potentially grow into something like that, but with a focus on security.
Yeah, I think that Facebook really led the way for me as far as motivating me to make something that is I mean, they just like expose people's information left and right, and
Yeah.
they act like it doesn't play a role in a lot of these data breaches. It's like people's
Mhm.
information is just sitting out there, and a lot of this privacy violation is contributing to like how people are getting into people's password reset stuff. They learn where they went to school. They learn where their hometown is. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yep.
Right. So there's that. I think that YadaCoin could also be used to weed out corruption. If we had like this sort of thing being used in the public sector where money's being spent, um, it's like maybe we don't want YadaCoin to be very private on the money side of it, is what the other side that I was thinking of. Because like, what if YadaCoin was tracking the the contracts of a city, a municipality or whatever, and we wanted to see where the public funds were going, which I don't think we can do right now, to with any sort of granularity, actually track how
No.
things. Yeah.
But I think with that said, I think the privacy is as little or as much as you make it to be, because in, let's say, a public sector scenario where you're working on some sort of funding from some government organization, whatever it might be, well, let's say the public wants to know where their money's going. Well, then you could outright say, well, here's the blockchain. This address right here is us. You can see the initial money in there. We sent it over, and then the receiver on the following end, you can track every single transaction, every single jump from point A through Z, and then follow up to where that money ended up going. And
Right.
on the flip side of that, any given user, because the width is an arbitrary selection of numbers and letters, any random Joe, you won't know what their address is. So wherever they're sending money, sure, you can track that from point A to point Z, depending on where they send or the receiver of the money. But without knowing that wallet information, then you don't know where or what that is. So it could go both ways. And that was kind of the way that someone initially explained the whole blockchain to me, or what one of its potential uses could be. And that is the tracking of these transactions, just as much as not being able to track who sent or received the transaction unless they want you to.
Yeah. Does that? It's just like, it's interesting because like Bitcoin would be private if you could do atomic swaps between blockchains, right? And you didn't need exchanges with KYC, which are essentially converting private, wallets into, traceable and pinned to an identity, kind of wallets. And then from there on after, every transaction is sort of tied back to that user and username back on an exchange or whatever, where they were identified. Because I mean, otherwise, it should be pretty much private. Other than the fact that a transaction can be. Well, I mean, one like a certain amount of the coin is going from one address to another, and that should have been good enough, right? I mean, but now it's like with all this KYC going on, now you can attach a person's name and all that to their address. So it's like now we have to do all this like mimble wimble stuff where it's like now you can like see an address or something like that, and you don't. Yeah, it's like you don't know who. Yeah, so you don't know how much is going anywhere, and you don't know where it's going. Like you don't even have the addresses or the amounts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's where that's going. So
now, could it be where the sending and the receiving address, which let me phrase it, because I can't speak on Yada specifically, going in. So you have the receiving address and you have the sending address. Can you make it so that you could make one on the fly? I know a lot of other of these crypto coin wallets, you're able to make new sending and receiving addresses. So while you have your WIF being your wallet identity, could you make it so it's I'm thinking more of like this ability to not be tracked, where you have your WIF and you can create as many sending or receiving addresses as you want. So let's say you create a new sending address, you send someone these coins, and then let's say for whatever reason now you're linked to that address. Well, you can go ahead and delete that address and create a new address that you can now send from that's no longer linked to the previous. So again, increasing that anonymity.
yeah, so the issue there is that you would have to spend an input and prove that you're able to spend that input. So like you have that previous transaction, which I'm calling an input. So it's like um, if you're proving that you can spend that transaction that was sent to you, basically, then it's like you're tying yourself, and then you're tying yourself to that transaction, and everybody in the network has to know how to tie you to that transaction, right? So I think that's the issue that comes up there, because like, yeah, I could make it so that you have a different address, like address A gets sent money, and then I create address B, and I want to use address B to send you money on, address C. So I'm gonna use the transaction that was sent to address A to pay for my transaction to you, address C, right? So then it's like, um, even if I have different keys on address A and address B, it's like uh, they still know that they're linked, because I'm telling you how to link them so that you can validate that I'm able to spend that transaction from address A. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe I'm like, yeah. So this is all crazy. So M2 has a comment. Let's look here. Actually, all private data with coins may be just encrypted, hidden as private messages. All private data with coins may be just encrypted / hidden as private messages. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you know what he might be referring to?
I think it might have been referring to one of the comments that was made earlier. I think he's you want to clarify that?
Yeah, it's M2 from the forum, from Discord. I think maybe he's talking about like making so like YadaCoin can do private messages between people. So maybe he's talking about like encrypted communication between. I mean, we could do that, because every node right now has its own identity. So when it sends to another node, it could easily just encrypt that communication, because it would have a shared key.
So he just said, I mean, on Explorer, we can't see who wrote to who in chats.
Yep. That's true.
Could it be, and again, this is kind of I hate to say potentially reinventing the wheel, but let's say you're able to create an organization and link accounts together. So from an organization standpoint, they have 10 different users who have these wallets or these identities associated with them. And then within that that organization, they can see some sort of public identity associated with them, but outside of that organization, you can't see that.
Oh, okay. So, okay, so like an employee, you wouldn't be able to see an employee outside of the organization that we're talking about?
Yes, what almost if it were like, so you have the master node. Down from that master node are these regular nodes, and then you also have the validators. But what if, let's say I'm posting a node and I set my node as being an organization. That organization then is able to create, I don't know, maybe wallets or sub-identities off of it that are associated with this node. And within these identities and this node, you'd be able to see some sort of private information or organizational information shared between all of these wallets or identities, but they would only be accessible within this node. Almost like when I build a node, it creates a private key, and that private key is shared between, or the public key aspect of that is shared between all of these identities. I'm thinking kind of like, I'm relating this back to like an Active Directory forest that I deal with, where within this domain you have different users in there. How can you create something like that from the blockchain standpoint?
So right now with Center Identity, I have it set up to where you create. So when you create your account on there, it sets you up as an organization, and then me as Center Identity, I invite them as an organization, and then I become like I'm like their parent identity to the organization. So Center Identity is like at the top of the hierarchy, and then organizations then invite their employees, and each of those employees, the organization is their parent identity. And then from there, the employees have contacts, and each of those contacts, the employee is their parent identity.
Okay. That sounds right along what I just mentioned.
Yeah. I'm not... so, yeah, but as far as visibility goes, I mean, like, that would allow you to manage visibility. I'm not sure, like... So you're thinking like Active Directory, like somebody wants to search identities, but you don't want to be able to pull up identities outside of a given organization, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I
or
definitely...
maybe not even necessarily like one user to another being able to search. Maybe if you're able to create some sort of structure within that, where I don't know if you're able to create administrators or users or groups or whatever it might be within that you can delegate different roles, features, whatever it might be in there. That way, like an administrator can search down, or within a group, users can search within that group, but not outside of that group.
Yeah, that is one thing I have been looking to do, is be able to search users inside of a group. And I was just thinking about something, like it just came to me, maybe I can do that. Because right now you can join a group, right? And it'll add it to your own list, but I don't think that it sends your identity to the group. But maybe like I need to look at how that's encrypted, because that might be something that I can do. Like if a person joins a group and it uses the group signature as the key for decrypting things, then maybe um, you know, anybody who has that key can see who is in the group. And then like that could play into the whole organization thing, where it's like, the organization creates the group, and then they just basically hand that key out to anybody, obviously through like a user interface where, that's not like, it's not like here's the key, but like, it just uses the key. And then they join the group that way. And then they can like search the group and see all the group members. Because I mean, ultimately, I want to be able to make it so that people can find and add each other. I mean, like growing it. Yeah, right now, like YadaCoin, it's all about scaling and growing. That's like the two issues, right? So it's like, how do we make an infrastructure that will scale along with, everything that will scale along with the amount of growth that I want to see. So it's like that's what I did with the service providers, the seed gateways, and the seeds, right? So because I mean, and the whole requirement, I guess I should have explained this. I don't know, but it's like my idea with all of this was the seeds will always be connected to each other. So that was my whole goal with that, is that the seeds will always be connected to each other. Like, there's no like disconnect between the seeds. There's not like regions or anything like that. All seeds all see each other all the time. That was my goal. And so you can't have that with like, if it's just totally peer-to-peer. You can't have like 100,000 simultaneous TCP connections to all the different nodes that are out there, regardless of what type of node they are, right? I mean, it just seems like it would get overloaded, especially with like, I don't know, just like duplicate transactions coming in from different nodes that you already have.
It sounds like potentially some sort of denial of service or distributed denial of service right there, which from a networking standpoint, depending on how you're going to host this, it will block a lot of that traffic as is.
Right. So I'm just thinking, so my thought is, okay, well, I have all the seeds connected to each other, and then all the seeds will then have their own seed gateway. And so a seed can have, I think it's a one-to-one relationship with a seed gateway.
Okay.
So the seed can have, let's say, like 5,000 different peers with like all of the different seeds out there. Let's say there's like 5,000 other seeds. Okay, so you have that, and then you have the seed gateways connected to all of those seeds, right? So then you have, so it's like each seed would have like 5,000 plus 1 connections, and the plus 1 would be the seed gateway. And then the seed gateway would have any number of service providers. So a seed gateway could say have like 5,000 service provider connections, right? And then each service provider then has that many users. So that the user is kind of the end. So it's kind of like just separating the amount of work out that each node has to do. And so like the seeds basically just they act as like a bridge to another network, if you will. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I plan to scale the Yada network, right? It's just have like that structure going on, because you could have like billions of users on it. at that point. It's yeah, just a matter of multiplication. So I don't know, something to think about there. And then beyond that, then it's about growth. Then it's like, okay, uh, we want to let people search for other users, and we want them to be able to add them easily, and then we want them to be able to interact easily. So it's like with the chat thing that we have right now, it's like you go on there, you can click a username in the group chat, and then add them, and then do direct encrypted communication, either in the mempool or the blockchain. Yeah. So those are the two elements, and I'm thinking like, I mean, those are the two things that I'm pretty excited about. I feel like I want to come up with more ways for people to connect. You know what I mean? They have like all this metaverse stuff with like these games and like virtual reality and all this stuff, and I'm like, what are some like low hanging fruit interactions that we can grab up like right now? That would be nice to know. That's what I would like to get input on. See what people.
I feel like some sort of Windows executable based identity. I don't want to call it a wallet because I don't think that would be the primary use of it in this case, but some sort of wallet that any given person could install that would give them the same feature set of the wallet, but without having to have a full node installed. And then having that as, or have that some sort of API associated with it that then could be used for, like you were saying, with some sort of game or whatever it might be, where instead of log in with Google, log in with Apple, you have the ability to log in with Yada or log in with Center Identity. I mean, I think ultimately it's going to come down to some sort of API that you build that will reach back to either one of these nodes or some sort of centralized identity server to handle that authentication.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could like have it run like a node that doesn't have the blockchain on it, and then they're just essentially like creating no coin transactions, So if they're not,
I know some of these other coins, they allow you to install their wallet, and the blockchain that it requires is only like the last 30 days worth of transactions or blocks that have been found or whatever it might be, to keep the overall size down, or it has pruning out of it to keep the blockchain size down to a certain size. So let's say, I don't know, if you require 100 megabytes for the full install, and it basically houses however many the last 100 megabytes worth of blocks found as, I guess, the node of the blockchain that it houses locally.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that's a way to make YadaCoins, like if you could somehow like be a service provider, and it's got to like tie into mining somehow too. Like if you can, because I mean, people can't spend YadaCoins because they don't have the node running, so they don't have the coins, but they could be handing up hash rate and contributing to the service provider getting coins that way. Or maybe there's some other way that like a service provider could get additional coins by like hosting these light nodes or whatever. I'm not sure how you would like prove that and like reward them that way, but I feel like a lot of other coins use like inflation to pay for things. I mean, it's like Because man, where it's either you're either taking it, you're either inventing new coins or you're taking